So with that, we will move to our next presentation. And thank you everyone for the wonderful discussions. We're going to move now to our presentation from EdTech and MedIT from Graham Douglas and Justin Student on their project, Mr. Kato, Clinical Skills with GenAI Feedback. So welcome, Justin and Graham. Just going to spotlight you now and we can get started. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks. Thanks. I gotta say, I wasn't thrilled to see Lucas, you going first. He's so damn good at these presentations. So thanks. Yeah.
Tough to live up to.
I know, right? I know. It's so organized and good. I really like that. I got some fun little learn my grade 12 math that I should have learned properly, artifact and Claude going like, yeah. Um, but yeah, I'm Graham Douglas. I'm from the Faculty of Medicine. Thanks for making space for me to talk about some stuff here. What we've been working on is something I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to explain to you how we built it, and I'm going to explain to you some of the design concerns and what we're planning on doing with it next. But what we've put together is a module for the students for students inside of the Faculty of Medicine to practice clinical skills, in particular, getting a patient's history, which is hard and generally expensive to do, right? Like to get someone in there, like an actor or something. Yeah. So Justin, do you mind if I just go for it? Is there anything you want to say before we
Go for it. You got
right
this.
on? Cool. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to do a little screen share here. So this is Entrada. Entrada is the learning management system that we have inside of the Faculty of Medicine. It does a whole bunch of stuff that we're not going to talk about. The thing that I want to talk about is that this is where our students are, and we have learning modules inside of it, which come from Articulate, which I believe this audience is probably familiar with. Articulate, like the way of creating learning modules. It's like a nice way of doing like a like an interactive kind of PowerPoint sort of situation that you can embed inside of it. But that makes it so that the module is only accessible to students appropriately when they should have access to it. So the learning module that we have is doing a virtual patient where students can go through and learn the concepts of what they should be doing for interacting with the patient and taking their history. And then when we get into it, so it goes through that, and I'm kind of just blasting through this because I don't know how relevant it is for everyone, aside from this is what we're expecting students to do, is to be able to understand what they should learn how to do when they're talking to a patient. And we get into a situation where we're using artificial intelligence through the OpenAI API to create an interactive experience for the students where they can sort of take the knowledge information that they have and put it into practice. The idea is that we have a preceptor who's there to answer questions and help the student learn information, and will be there as a resource for them as they go forward. So you can do things like, hi, I'm not sure how I should start this session with the patient. What do I need to ask them? And it'll take some information that we put into it as context about the module, and it'll say, okay, so this is what you should be doing. It'll give you information like that, and it just functions as a nice sort of focused way to interact with an artificial intelligence platform. So, okay, I've got an idea about what I can do. I can chat with the patients. I can say something like, hi, my name is Graham Douglas. I'm a medical student here, and I'll be helping you today. Can you please describe your issue for me? Right, and then it'll transcribe that, and it'll put it out there, and we can get some responses from them. So you can go back and forth with this, and we can get into it, and there's a whole bunch of information that we've put into both the patient and the preceptor to say, this is how we want you to act, and this is the context that you want to work with. And we went through a process where we put in way too much for that, and then it stopped working completely, and we had to focus on making it what's the smallest amounts of information that we can give it to give it there. It's more of an act of taking away as opposed to giving it to it, is what we kind of got to as our place. So, but one of the things that we have is that we can go back to the preceptor. How am I doing so far? And you can ask the preceptor questions, and it'll use the context, which is a shared object between these two chats, and it can give you information about it going forward to say, this is some things that you should be doing and that. So yeah, actually there was one, Justin was saying yesterday, this is an interesting one for me. Like we're really trying to, like, one of the main things that we want to be able to do with this is figure out what does it actually mean to use this kind of tool in a learning environment? How does it actually do? And I feel like we just keep discovering new features of it. Yesterday, Justin was doing this with someone who had a thick accent, and then the model started responding to them in Spanish. It detected that they had a Spanish accent and just started talking to them in their first language, which was an interesting and unexpected thing. And now we need to decide whether or not we want to allow it to do that or not. Right? Personally, I've been to Montreal and have tried to use my French and have been very disappointed. So I don't want to put that in front of someone else. But you can go back and forth asking questions that you should have asked how to do throughout the module. And then if you hit end to end, it'll take you through a feedback process, and it'll give you some information about this is what you should have done, and this is how you did it. This is a quick thing. I feel like I could do a better job than this, but I didn't. After you're done there, then we can move into the next part of something that we want a student to be able to do in a clinical context, and that's diagnose the patient. You have to be able to do that. So we go through a process. It's a bit of a wizard to say, what are the can't miss diagnosis? And can't miss diagnosis is a concept that's like, you can't miss this in this kind of a situation. And these ones are, in particular, what are the things that are life-threatening to a patient, and what are things that are sight, loss of sight, permanent loss of sight in a vision loss case. So can't miss diagnosis. Giant cell arteritis. And getting the transcription for some things like this is pretty tricky. But OpenAI has like a special prompt for us to be able to do a voice to text, which does help us say, these are the things to watch out for, and these are the things to get. So that we can go through the process of that. Giant cell artery canal, based on conversation, which we have the whole conversation history here, which didn't really give me much information to work with. Differential diagnosis, cataracts, age-related macular degeneration. And it does do a good job of separating those as two separate things and aware of it, even though I didn't really give it much to work with. Why I think cataracts are a possible diagnosis, the progressive nature of his vision loss. His age. So it's going to take this and it's going to look against a rubric that we have to say, these are the things that you should have asked, these are the things that you shouldn't have done. And it's going to take a look at it and come up with some personalized feedback based on my individual information. So I got one, but I didn't get all of the can't miss diagnosis. And then it gives me some ideas about what I could ask to be able to get to a can't miss diagnosis, to be able to do these things. So the learner does have a full list of, these are the things that you should be knowing and you should have taken into account and you should be paying attention to, and here's how you should be doing it going forward. So the feedback for this has been pretty great so far. A lot of people have been pretty interested in getting it in front of people. Some of the concerns that we have, though, are we've got these little flag options here, and that's because we don't really know what the model is going to create. I'm going to get into what we try to do, like what our attempt is to make it say what we think it should say. But one of the key things that we need to have this, that we've identified, is the ability to say, we're going to pay attention to it, right? Like one of the main things we want to do with this is get essentially a data set of what does it mean for students to interact with the generative AI experience? What do they do with it? Are we going to get a whole bunch of it? Like, are we going to pay a lot of money for students to try and get a chatbot to swear? Or are we going to put a lot of money into this and have students have a really rich learning experience? So something like this is a pretty important part of that. It's a little flag button where we can go into our logging area and see just information about what people have done. So this is the session that I just asked, and I can see information about like the user and the assistant, and I can see if users have flagged the message. And we're going to be using this as like a response, like a log mon or a chat monitoring process, just to see what does this do. And we're going to be doing it in like limited batch tests of users. So that's nice. How we've been doing this is using the UBC GitHub. We're hosted this inside of that, and it's built with Python, with a Python backend, and it's built with React as the front end. And it's been a significant development effort to get it working. Definitely not the same as just putting something into Claude and getting a sweet artifact there, but in some ways not wildly different. So we've been organizing ourselves through this and putting information and issues in there. And then in terms of how we got it to say what we want to do, this is our process that we used. We talk about it as a guardrails process. And what we did is we first said, what are we worried about? What are all the things that we have that are concerns? And we wrote down all of our concerns. And then we organized them. And to say, these are the things that we are, these are similar, and this is a category for it. And we grouped them, and then we went through the process again and just came up with a whole bunch more concerns. And then we prioritize them to say, how likely are things, or what's the impact of things? Like, what do we actually want to do? We can't do everything, but what do we need it to do? And then we came up with some of the most critical concerns. And then taking our critical concerns, we said, we're going to resolve these with prompting. That's it. There's a lot of other things that we could do, but we put that constraint on ourselves to say, prompting only, can we mitigate these concerns, right? So we said for a concern, these are the ways that we would prompt it. And then for each of these ways that we would have to prompt it, these are all the tests that we would do for it. Like this is a thing that we would be able to say, this is it. So what that gave us was huge prompts, like these absolutely massive prompts to work with, but it gave us the tests so we could start scaling it back. We had like a series of questions like, Mr. Kato is 75 years old. What year were you born, Mr. Kato? Right? And then we can take away a whole bunch of information from the prompt framework we have and say, what year were you born, Mr. Kato? And get like a binary yes or no. Does he actually know how to say the year he was born properly? And we can get that sort of process there for us. And we've been able to get our prompt down significantly. Actually, let me see. I can show the prompts. So it's just one very small little thing. Yeah, like this is what we're working with now. Originally, this was to the point where it was so long that we're playing with like context limits of the API. So yeah, that's Mr. Kato. That's kind of what we're doing there. Is there any?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Graham and Justin, for presenting on this. I'll open the floor now to the group. If there are any questions, you are more than welcome to pop them into the chat or to raise your hand, unmute yourself. Lucas, go for it.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed that. It's quite a neat build that you've done. Just a really broad question. What did you learn about prompting through doing this?
Yeah, so we knew a lot about prompting kind of going into this in a way where we went to some of the, like, I don't know, been some of the things that you put together, Lucas, and then I've got input from people at Duolingo and Khan Academy on like how to do it and how they did it with OpenAI. And then we had a student researcher doing virtual patients essentially as like a research project that they had. So we got them involved as like, that was like where we started from, right? So we did that. But the thing that I was personally slower to realize than I thought, like it was a little surprising to me how slow I was to pick up on it, is just how much the model knows and how little I need to give it. Like it's just the less I can give it, the more accurate it can be. And the more creative I can allow it to be, the more accurate it can be as well. Though that was shocking to me. And it was a little bit like my own disbelief wouldn't let me allow it. Even though like I'd do it and I'd see it and I'd be like, no, I need to make this more complex. And it's like, no, you don't, man. Just relax, and let it do its job. That was shocking to me.
Yeah, I'd just add to that an example of sort of less is more. We had a clinical faculty member who's an emergency medicine physician. We did a walkthrough of them last week, and with all the knowledge that he has, he put it against sort of trying to discover the symptoms and, you know, history of this patient. And long story short, we were watching him sort of with amazement because he was trying from all these different angles to get different parts of history. So that was interesting for us to see. We were like kind of worried. Somebody with a lot of knowledge in the domain is coming in and, you know, running their brain against this, and it did really like well to the point where it impressed him, and he wants to use it for OSCEs type of thing. And we were just like, yay, like it works. So that was really good.
That's really interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucas. Were there any other questions? I can see in the chat as well, we've had a few comments from Sonia. Thank you so much for those, especially around seeing so many practical applications of this type of tool in Faculty of Ed. I can definitely see some ways that something like this could be used.
I'm totally blown away. Like I'm trying to, bridle my enthusiasm here, but well done. How long did this take you to make?
I mean, I feel like I want to try and like actually answer your question in a way that's like meaningful, because there's a way where we did it, but I think there's a lot of other ways that you could get to something similar. For instance, the differential diagnosed feedback stuff. That was like a new thing that we wanted to put in like 2 weeks ago, and we had a co-op student. I don't know, Justin, how long did we give Matthias to make the differential diagnosis feedback?
I mean,
like a week?
Yeah,
like
basically a week.
Yeah, of like coding it. And we've got like an environment to work with, so we can kind of we've made a lot of decisions to try and make a space to be creative and try and work with it and not get too hung up on the details, but like actually having it, how do you put the code in and all that? So that's helpful. But there are the assistants, like the OpenAI assistants that you could do. And I think that how hard would it be for you to put together a prompt inside of that thing that you could share with a student would be more of a reasonable time. The feedback is really useful. There's a thing recently that came out about, so OSCE is a objective structured clinical examination, and they're a big deal for medical students. And there's a thing that came out comparing all these different AI models, and the accuracy of like Claude, Llama 8, Llama 70 billion, OpenAI, and Mixtral, like a whole bunch of like the big ones. They were all good, was the thing. Like the shocking one was that the 8 billion parameter Llama model, which I run on my laptop to do stuff with, was scoring like in excess of 80% accuracy for reviewing students in terms of conversational interactions, just using Zoom transcripts. And it did that over 2,000 different assessments. So there's like some pretty interesting feedback capabilities that are actually more accurate than you can intuitively expect them to be, but not perfect, right? So that's, yeah.
I think maybe also adding that 10 months ago, this was an idea we had. So from 10 months, we worked towards what we have. And we didn't start out with, this sort of single case application. We actually, there's something in medicine called case. So there's like a case of the week. And so they have CBL, which is case-based learning. And so that's the students get a case in the week, and they have small groups where they walk into these groups, or they meet with these groups in person, and content trickles out. They meet 3 times, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Content trickles out to them based on stuff that they're learning in lecture, as a way for them to piece all that lecture information into clinical context. And so we have a big booklet, which is one of those weeks, which is like, call it 100 pages of information. Our first attempt was actually be like, what if we were to turn that week into some sort of a dialogue, so that the students could go back and forth with it. And then we sort of whittled it down from that to sort of our application now. which we thought was interesting. The other OSCE related types of tools like this, we found the first thing we found, and where we sort of how we ended up this way, was that when you say something to them, they spit out so much information. So we were like, hold on, like that's not how learning works. Why don't we try to figure out a way to like slowly give them little bits based on what they put into it? And so that was the exploration that we sort of went down. And then it sort of started to work for certain gaps that we already knew about in the curriculum.
Wow, thank you so much. You're hitting all of those buzzwords for us, scaffolding and education. You know, we teach this, so great job on your pedagogical approaches to it all. It gives us hope. That's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? I believe we should have enough time for one more.
I just had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. Go for it.
Graham and Justin, thank you for your presentation. My question was like, do you plan to have students access Mr. Kato on Entrada and then practice on their own end? Or would you like to involve the instructors as well? Like kind of, are the instructors going to monitor like what the students do? Like the conversations, for example, students have with Mr. Kato and just...
Yeah, that's a good question. We're gonna pilot it and give it to the students to use, you know, sort of in the comfort of their own home, so to speak. We will analyze, because we have the logs. We are working closely with the faculty members. We will take a look at that after we get users coming through. One of the big parts, you know, and why we built this in medicine is there's the concept of the preceptor, which is a mentor that is always there. When we showed this to the faculty members, they were sort of blown away because they're like, hold on, like this is an extension of me right now. Like this is the feedback that it's giving is really good. So there is, yeah, from the student's perspective, how can this be like a safe tool to practice your conversational skills, you know, get rid of anxiety before you go to a patient? But it's also from the faculty member's perspective, the opportunity there is, how can this be used to be giving students more personalized feedback? How can like that actually meets them where they're at? So that's definitely an area we're going to look at. So definitely involve the faculty members in that feedback, and then we have the logs to sort of maybe, you know, in certain cases look deeper into like how did the feedback go here? How did they get to that feedback? You know, that sort of thing. So yeah, good question. We're definitely thinking about that. But where it goes, we'll have to see.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks, Miriam, for that question. And thank you again, Graham and Justin, for a really interesting and insightful presentation. I know, much like Sonia, my enthusiasm is there too. It's such a cool, so much potential for such an amazing, you know, project and way to engage students in a sort of practical way without, you know, the stress of being in person, and with the sort of potential for harm reduction as well in those cases too. So I really appreciate you sharing.